everybody, and welcome to Chef's Baking Blog. Today, as promised from my community post, I'm going to make some apple rolls or apple buns. These are going to be in the shape of a sausage, basically, rolled round with some apple inside them, and I'm going to slightly caramelise the apple and cook it so that some of the juices have been removed before putting it into the dough. So it's not a difficult recipe, but it does take some time because we have to let the dough rise and proof successfully. But I'll go on to the ingredients, and for this I have 275 grams, which is 1 2/3 cups plus 2 tablespoons of bread flour. That's based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup. I have 135 milliliters, half a cup plus 1 tablespoon of water, which is between 40 and 42 degrees Celsius, which is 104 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I have 19 grams, 1.5 tablespoons of caster sugar, 12 grams, about half a tablespoon of oil. I have 3.5 grams, which is about 1 teaspoon of active dry yeast, or half a packet of active dry yeast. I have 3 grams, half a teaspoon of salt, and I have half a medium egg, which would be large in the USA. So this half of the egg, which I've beaten, is weighs 26 grams out of the shell. I have the remaining half of the egg here, which I'm going to use for an egg wash later, so nothing's wasted there. And then for the apples, I've got 3 fairly small apples here, which I'm going to peel and dice into small pieces. Then I have half a teaspoon of cinnamon, which is 1.5 grams, and that's on top of 25 grams, 2 tablespoons of caster sugar. And I have a little water, about a tablespoon of water, 15 milliliters, and that's going to be for caramelizing the apples. So the first thing we need to do is to activate our yeast, and for that I'm simply going to put the yeast into my lukewarm water, and I'm going to add just a little bit of the sugar as well, and I'm going to leave that to activate for 5 to 10 minutes. It should dissolve into the water, and then it should come to the top and become quite foamy or frothy. And once that's activated, I'll come back and we'll go on to make the dough. The yeast has foamed up, as you can see, and it's so it's nicely activated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my flour with the sugar and the salt into the bowl of a standard mixer. You could do this by hand, and I've done this recipe by hand and it works very well. But I'm doing it in the mixer just for convenience today. I'm just going to give the salt and the sugar a mix around, and then I'll form a well in the centre, and into that I'm going to pour the oil and the egg and the yeast. Into the flour. Sorry for that noise. And I'll just scrape the excess out of the jug. And the same with the egg. And then I'm going to just mix that on a low speed until it forms into a shaggy dough. And I've mixed that for about 90 seconds on that low speed, and most of the dough has become incorporated into that shaggy dough. So I'm just going to scrape that down, and then I'm going to just bring the remaining dough, loose ingredients, up a little bit to mix it in. And then I'm going to knead that for 3 to 4 minutes probably. I want to knead it until I can stretch the dough using the window pane test, and it stretches a good way before it starts to break. So I'll knead this, and this is going to be on a medium speed. So I've kneaded that for about 5 minutes, and I'm just going to pinch a piece off, and it's still tacky as it will be, and I'm just going to stretch that and see how it stretches, and if it gets quite thin without tearing, then that will mean that it's kneaded enough, and that's actually looking quite good. As you can see, it will tear of course eventually, but that's nice and thin. If I hold that up to the light, I can see through it, and so it's just going to tear there now, I think. Yes, so that's good enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that out of the bowl and simply form it into a ball. That's good enough. Scrape down. So I'm going to form that into a ball, turning it over on itself a little bit. And then I'm going to put that in a lightly greased bowl. I'll just put it in and then pick it up and turn it over. I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap, and then I'm going to put it into a warm place and leave it to proof until it is doubled in size. Now that might take an hour, or it might take 2 hours. It depends on the heat in the kitchen basically. But once it's doubled in size, I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step for this. But in the meantime, I will also prepare the apples, and then we'll cook those to caramelise them. So I have my pan ready, and I'm going to put my water in, and the sugar and the cinnamon, and I'm actually just going to bring that up so that it starts to boil. The sugar will dissolve. And then I'm going to add in my apple. Now I've peeled and diced my apple quite finely, and the weight of apple once it's diced, just for information, is 220 grams that I'm using, and I may not need all of that for my rolls, but then it will simply mean I have some to go with my porridge in the mornings. And as the apples cook, of course, they will release liquid, and that's one of the things I want to do. I want to reduce this down without cooking the apples too much, but until there's not a lot of liquid remaining. So that's cooked down now, and there's not much liquid in there, and I'm simply going to transfer the apples into a bowl and leave them to cool, and they will release some more juice, which I will probably drain off later. So I'll be back with you when the dough is risen and we're ready to go on to the next step. So my dough has doubled in size, and that's been resting for about an hour and a quarter. So I'm going to lightly flour the work surface, and I'm going to tip the dough out onto it. And I'm going to knock the air out of it, and then I want to divide that into 6 pieces. And I want them to be roughly equal in size. So I've got them divided out into 6 pieces, and they're about 76 to 77 grams each. So I'm going to flour the work surface again, and I'm going to just form the dough together, and I'm going to press it down and do the same with the remainder. So I'm just going to leave those to rest for 5 minutes, and having rested it for 5 minutes, I'm going to just flour the surface a little bit, and I want to roll this out, and I'm going to roll it out 6 or 7 inches in length if I can, and into a rectangle. And it doesn't matter if it's not a precise rectangle. And that's good enough like that. And then what I want to do is I want to put some slits in it. So I'm just going to mark those there, and take a knife and just slit it a little bit like that. And that's good enough. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my apple and lay it along the bottom, like that. And then I'm simply going to brush the top edge with a little of my beaten egg, like that. And I'm going to roll this dough over the apple, enclosing it, like that, and roll it up like that. And then you can either pinch the ends together if you want to, or you can leave them open. I'm going to pinch mine together, I think. And pick that up and put it onto a baking tray, and do the same with the remainder. So I've shaped 6. I've done 5 in the log shape, and I've just done a slightly different shape for the 6th one, just to see how that turns out, basically. So I'm going to now cover those with some lightly greased plastic wrap, and I'm going to leave them until they've proofed again, and when I gently press them it should make an indentation, and when I remove my finger it should spring back, but slowly, and maybe not quite reach all the way. If it springs right back, it's not proofed enough, and if the dent stays in there without springing back at all, it's proofed too much. So as it gets to the stage I want, where it springs back slowly and almost gets level again, I will have my oven preheated to 180 degrees Celsius. That's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, and these will be ready to go into the oven, but I'll come back because we need to brush some egg over the top before we put them in the oven. So my dough has now proofed, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to brush some of that remaining beaten egg over the surface of each one. So they're brushed all over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those into the oven, and I'm going to bake them for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes they should be baked right through. If they begin to brown too much on the top, I will cover them with some aluminium foil towards the end of the baking. Then I'll take them out of the oven once they're baked, put them on a wire rack and allow them to cool down, and once they've cooled down I'll come back and show you the results. I baked the apple rolls for 30 minutes and I took them out of the oven and put them on a wire rack, and I just brushed a little bit of butter on the top. That's just to soften the crust a little bit. And they actually baked up quite nicely. So this is what they look like, and I've cut one in half so that you can see it. And usually I would just eat from one end all the way through. So the dough is cooked quite nicely, and the dough is cooked quite nicely, as you can see, and the apple inside. The steam from the apple will cause the dough to create that little hollow, but it's fine. So I'll have a taste of this. So it's actually lovely. I have a slight tartness to the apple, which is cooked through nice and soft, and it gives a wonderful flavour, and the softness of the dough. So it's a very basic dough really, with just a little bit of egg in it as well, and a little bit of sugar. So slightly sweetened, but not very sweet. But then the apple really makes the flavour. So these are actually quite simple to make, and you can make different shapes. So I made this one here, which was just a disc of dough with 4 little notches cut into it, and then I folded one notch all the way around, lifted a second notch, folded it all the way around, and then the same with the third and the fourth, just to enclose the apple inside. So, as I say, quite a simple recipe, and it's very, very good. So, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the video. That will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.